The decision to approve the buyout of dairy company Clover is causing a stink. Cosatu is particularly unhappy with the Competition Tribunal's decision to approve the takeover. That's largely because the buyer is Tel Aviv-based and not a local company. For more on the story, we're joined now by Cosatu's Matthew Parks. Thanks very much, Mr. Parks, for coming into studio. So your unhappiness with this decision, is it because it's an Israeli company or just because it's an international company?
It's basically threefold. One, yes, it's an Israeli company, and Cosatu has long supported a campaign to boycott Israeli companies as part of giving solidarity to the Palestinian cause, just like what is done by the world to apartheid South Africa in the 80s and so on. We need to show solidarity to Palestinian brothers and sisters to get the liberation struggle moving, but also we're concerned as Cosatu about the impact upon local jobs. It is an issue raised strongly at the Competition Tribunal about possible 500 plus jobs being at risk. The company did make a commitment to the tribunal, and the tribunal imposed conditions upon them not to retrench workers for at least 3 years. However, we're not convinced by that. We think the tribunal could have been harsher.
Because what happens after those 3 years?
After 3 years and 1 day, you can retrench workers. And we already have 40% of workers unemployed. 3 years is a very short time frame. But also we often have seen companies promise many things to the Competition Tribunal and afterwards renege on their commitments.
Yeah.
And then workers are left in the unemployment queue and there's no one there to assist them. But also we have a problem with successful South African grown companies, local international giants like Clover, which employs 50,000 workers, basically being sold off to foreign companies as our crown jewels. We think a South African company should have come forward to buy it. They should have given that opportunity to South Africans to do so. Because what you're going to see is that this company, which has been built over 110 years plus by South African workers, is now going to see the profits being shifted overseas to Israel. It's not going to benefit local companies or workers. We would rather have seen foreign companies coming to invest in South Africa, creating new jobs, new companies, new economic sectors, as opposed to just simply taking off our crown jewels.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a difficult balancing act, isn't it? It's trying to attract foreign investment, but then also protecting South African companies' crown jewels, as you put it, like Clover.
No, look, it's a difficult thing, and we appreciate we live in a free market economy. There's global trade rules and so on we're bound to. But I think the Competition Tribunal can be more assertive. Government can push harder. But also, Clover is a food and beverage company. It's a giant. Food security is not just like any other part of the economy. It's not like selling socks or something like that. Food security is the heart of a nation's sovereignty. And government's talking about entrenching food security, making sure people have healthy lifestyles and so on. We really want those kind of companies which are strategic being in South African hands, not just being sold off to foreign companies.
Should this not be a policy issue in terms of retaining companies like Clover in South African hands? Do we even know whether Clover reached out, whether they reached out to other businesses, other potential buyers, local buyers?
We don't believe they did, and they definitely didn't do it enough. There was some South African partners to this deal who withdrew because of the Israeli sanction campaign. So really, the Clover should have really thought about that. They could have gone to other companies. They could also have looked at a more favorable mix to have a lower foreign percentage ownership, a majority South African ownership, and they could have looked more carefully about the retrenchment dangers to workers as well.
Do you know why the decision to sell?
We think it's just simply about profits. The management wants to make a profit. They couldn't care less about South African workers. They couldn't care less about food security, protecting the economy. They just want to make a profit and run.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what Clover has to say about Cosatu's opinion on that. So in terms of the Competition Tribunal's responsibility, shall we say, in deciding around the sale of a company like this, aside from that 3-year moratorium on retrenchments, could it have been harder here?
We think they could have been more creative, they could have been stricter, they could have gone beyond the 3 years, but they could also have put conditions for additional jobs to be created. Yeah. Clover promised to create new jobs. The Competition Commission could have held them to that, could have pushed and said we want to see 5,000 jobs, for example, to be created. We think they could have reduced the foreign shareholding of the company to below 51%, so that you retain the South African nature of the company. We think they really went for a minimalist approach on this regard.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like that on face value. We'll have to get Clover's reaction to what you've been saying. Thanks very much for coming into studio. Cosatu's Matthew Parks joining us here as we unpack the story around the buyout of dairy company Clover, and that's to a Tel Aviv-based buyer.